So thank you, Emily, for being here. Emily is the first in a series of student-to-student interviews between Williams College Museum of Art interns and our beloved, just recently graduated Williams Studio Art majors. I'm Annie, an intern at WCMA this summer. I'm going into my junior year studying studio art and math. And I love talking about art and the creative process in general. So I'm very excited to hear your thoughts, Emily. But first, Rachel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm an intern in WCMA's communication department this summer, and I'm a rising junior majoring in studio art, art history, and psychology.
And Emily, before we begin, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and your body of work?
Yeah, definitely. My Wi-Fi seems to be kind of bad, so I'm sorry if I'm getting stuck. But my name is Emily Zheng. I just graduated from Williams, class of 2021. I'm from Indiana originally, and I majored in studio art and concentrated in global studies and also justice and law. So for the senior show this year, I made a piece that was really centered around fortune cookies. It's kind of hard to explain. It was an installation piece. So I don't know if words or pictures really do it justice, but it was inspired by my parents who have owned Chinese restaurants and worked in Chinese restaurants as long as I can remember.
Okay, great. Thank you. And can you just tell me a little bit about your art journey and what role art has played or plays in your life currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe a lot of studio majors feel this way, but growing up, you were seen as like the artsy kid. And that was definitely me. Like growing up, kids in class would ask me to draw pictures for them and things like that. So I think I always was inclined toward drawing growing up, but I didn't really think of it as a serious thing until I went to college. I didn't come in planning to major in studio art. But after taking a bunch of classes, I was like, why not? I'm probably already halfway through the major. And I think Williams really made art feel like something that I should pursue. I feel like I was able to own that a lot more and see it less as a hobby and more as a serious way of communicating.
Great. So in your artist statement, you say, my work is primarily an ode to my parents, two immigrants who've spent nearly 30 years working in the Chinese restaurant industry. So could you tell us a bit how your family's experiences have impacted your artistic trajectory and practice?
Yes. So I guess a little story that I like to tell is really the first art experience that I had was being super duper bored in my parents' restaurant. When you're a kid and they work like 13 hours a day, instead of staying at home, they would just like throw me and my sister in a table in the corner. And there's not much you can do except like, I don't know, read books or do puzzles, especially before like iPads and iPhones were a thing. And so my sister and I got really into like taking dinner napkins, like the diner napkins that you see at all restaurants. And we would just draw pictures on the back of those like all day long. So in a very concrete way, I think being at the restaurant has always been a key part of my art experience. But as I've gotten older, I think I've started to reflect on what I'm passionate about when it comes to making art and why I even feel like creating things. And a lot of that comes from, I think, seeing my parents work and the labor that they put into their work every day and understanding how making art seems like it's a privilege. I understand that like they don't really get the luxury of like sitting down and creating something beautiful because they're so focused on like working and creating a livelihood for our family. And in college, taking the art classes that I did really got me thinking a lot about that. And I made it a big focus in my work, especially junior and senior year.
Thank you. That's really lovely. And also reading your artist statement, you mentioned not only that it was for your parents, but you said that each time I sit down to work, there is one phrase that repeats in my mind for you. So I'm intrigued by the art, not only being for your parents, but also being for us, the audience. Can you tell me more about what that means to you?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to say this like in the most succinct way, but I've been mulling over like what I consider my favorite part of art to be, or like huge question, like what the purpose of art is a lot these past 2 years. And I think something that I keep going back to is this idea of like the common thread. Doing critiques at Williams in our art classes, I think is what really got me thinking about this, like how you can convey an idea or a thought or get someone to understand an experience that you personally have by creating some type of visual art. And sometimes it does a better job of doing that than like an essay ever could. So like with that idea, I think especially senior year, creating things for me became a lot about like finding what are the common understandings that I share with whoever my audience is, and trying to get them to I don't know, it doesn't even have to be like a purpose or a point that I'm trying to make through my piece, but if they can glean something from what I've created that like was a thought they wouldn't have had unless they looked at my stuff, then I consider that like a successful work of art. That's my favorite feeling, is when you're standing with like a group of 8 people who might not talk to each other in a different circumstance, and then they all start to talk about like, oh, like this makes me understand what it was like to like be I don't know, like a Chinese restaurant worker or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful way of phrasing it. Because I've been thinking about that too, how going into a museum, there's always in each exhibit, there's the element of the wall text and the words, and sometimes even a specific message or like little paragraph on the intent of the work, and then the work itself, and how the work itself can convey more than an essay. And I like how you phrased it in that you have a message, but there's this wonderful shared space where we each bring our own messages to it, and the like unsaid connection that includes more than just conceptual understanding, but emotion and you know, the weird energy and the weird air between relationships and you know, the unspeakable concepts of life. To get
yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Williams definitely, I think, trains you for situations like that, since like in class when you present something or do a critique, there's no wall text to go with it. Being time that I had wall text with any of my work, and I think not having it has been good practice.
Yeah. So could you tell us more about your process in creating a work? So how do you typically begin? Where do you derive your ideas from?
Gosh, I wish I had a better answer than what probably most like 12-year-olds could tell you, but sometimes I just go on Instagram and I have like a saved folder that's just called art, which is the most generic name ever. But anything that I think is mildly interesting, whether it's like technique or conceptually, I'll save it in that folder. And then like once we get an assignment in class or whatever, then I'll just scroll through that and be like waiting for a light bulb to go off. I think I really look for those moments when it's like, wow, like this really clicks right now. which is not a technique that I would recommend, especially if you're a student, because sometimes it's the night before a project is due and you're scrolling through Instagram and there are no light bulbs happening.
Yeah, no, I really relate to that. I feel like half of my Instagram is like furniture and tapestries. But yeah, on that same vein, in terms of your inspiration, is there anything, this is sort of an on the spot question, but is there anything right now that is particularly inspiring to you?
Oh, good question. Right now I'm thinking a lot more about like digital work and like graphic design type things. But I feel like the like distinction between like, oh, making something digitally and then like making something by hand or like creating some type of like sculpture installation is something that I would like to bridge. So I guess I'm really inspired by works that like combine the physical aspect of making art and also utilize like newer technologies with it.
Thank you. So sort of moving on, do you have a favorite work of art that you've seen in Williamstown or a favorite artistic space on campus?
Oh, wow. See, now I feel like a washed up alum thinking about my good old days in college. I'm someone who likes switching spaces a lot. I have a hard time staying in one spot. So I don't know if I have a favorite place that I like always go to. I know that I always dreamed of like being the person who was outside of their dorm on a sunny day on the lawn with a picnic blanket making stuff. But out of the like 5 sunny days you get in a year, that hasn't really happened. If I had a dream art location, that's what it would be though.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I relate to that. I have my picnic blanket in my dorm right now, which has not gotten as much use as it wants to.
Yeah.
So in addition to studio art, you also concentrated in justice and law and global studies. Do you find that one field influenced your understanding of the other or that they mixed in any way?
Definitely. Like I was saying earlier, I think that majoring in studio art was kind of a happy accident almost. If justice and law or global studies were full-blown majors instead of just concentrations, I probably would have majored in those. I'm very happy that Williams led me down the path of taking more art classes and diving into that more. But those three topics have always been intertwined for me. I think a lot more about like who my art is meant for and like what that means like socioeconomically than I did before college. Like for a long time, I would like go on these rants about how much I didn't like museum art, and I was like a big public art person. I've not like died down from that a little bit more, but that aspect of like, who are you creating this for? Like, who's able to access it, and like whose voice is sharing this particular story that you're trying to tell has always been something that I've thought about.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I feel like in studio art specifically, most people that I interact with within the major have some other major or area of study that they bring to it. And that studio art as a study is so wonderfully open and free in terms of like the projects that we can create and really like the independence built within like the academic field. So it's always nice to, the energy of the studio space I feel like is really enriched by having global studies and mathematics from myself, and Rachel, you're doing art history as well, and psychology, I believe. Yeah. So it's a wonderful mix of combining everything into this visual understanding that that I feel like is key to moving past just like the academic essay writing mode and into this different realm. And in that regard, I'd like to hear about, now that you've graduated, about your future hopes and dreams, and how you see art fitting into your life as you go forward.
Oh, big question. I am definitely in like this floating liminal space right now where I don't know if I can concretely say like what the future looks like. But one thing that I'm sure of is I do want like creativity to be a part of my life somehow, which I wasn't so sure about before. But I think the definition of being artistic has expanded for me. And I see myself like, no matter what field I go into. For a while, I thought about going into law school, which is out of the picture, at least for the moment. But I would probably find a way to incorporate art into that somehow. I think on a more personal level, I'm just excited to pick up more projects, and I think you utilize what I've learned and practiced at Williams to tell more stories from people who don't really get the chance to.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I feel like art, what's been on my mind recently as I've been working for WCMA, and engagement and just like general museum practice, is what art actually means, and the idea of a museum being a place of art, but not only visual art, but the feeling of art and the feeling of creation. And I feel like being in a studio, creating physical objects, even if upon graduation, I might not do anything related to like visual art, but that concept of the art emotion and the purpose of art, I think will bleed over, and inevitably bleeds over into the rest of daily activity and thinking, and just your way of being in the world.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely think of it as a form of communication, like just as much as it's a way of expression. And I would love to see some of your work sometime. I'm very intrigued by the intersection between math and art.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm just I'm early in both of the majors, and I have 2 years ahead of me, but I'm very excited to see as well how they converge in these. I feel like in every study there's so many different ways to approach creation, that we'll see infinite possibilities. So thank you, Emily, for this conversation. It was lovely to talk to you, and Rachel, thank you as well. And congratulations on your graduation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Bye.